Alright, so what do each of these components do? So this is loading the system namespace. Um, Writer will actually say that using directive is not required by the code and can be safely removed. That's why it's grayed out. A lot of historical code will have this included, and I'll show you why in a little bit later, but this is kind of historically added everywhere, but it is not actually required. This is going to be our namespace. So just like in C++, namespaces are a way that you can add classes, add methods, add functions, add everything under a namespace, and you can have two classes with the exact same name under different namespaces and refer to them separately. By default, usually there's going to be a namespace named after whatever your solution is or your project. Inside of that, we are going to have a single class. This class is public, means it can actually be accessed by other classes, other namespaces, everything else. This class is named Hello World, so there's nothing too surprising here. Inside of this, we have a single method, and this method is main. The first thing that you will notice that main has a capital M. This is more of a Java syntax holdover than a C++ syntax holdover. C++, you would typically use a lowercase main, but in Java it would be uppercase. So make sure it's uppercase. This is a void function, means it's not returning anything. And this is static, which means that you can invoke this function without having to create an instance or an object of class Hello World. If it was not static, before you could actually use main, you would have to create an object named or object of type Hello World, and then you would have access to the main function. This is the parameters for whenever you call the main function. In this case, this is going to be command line arguments, and this will be, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this will be an array of strings known as args. Alright, so inside of our main function we have a single line, console.writeLine, hello world, semicolon. So just like in C++ and Java, lines have to be terminated with a. This here is equivalent to println in Java or cout in C++. So this is writing out to the console, or actually invoking the console class. And if we hover over it, we'll see public static class console. Notice that this is a public class. It is static, so we don't actually have to say new class or new console. We are calling the WriteLine method. So the WriteLine method, you give it a string from the class, and it will write the specified string value followed by the current line terminator to the standard output. This is the string that we are passing it, hello world. There is another method in console called just write, and instead of putting a new line, notice how this has a new line there. When we do this with just write, and once it finishes, notice that we do not get that extra new line there. So if we were to say console.write hello again and run this, notice that these two lines would be right after each other. If you use WriteLine, then each of these will be on their own line because they will add a new line afterwards. Now that new line is dependent upon the operating system. Under Windows, it does a \r\n on or a CRLF, carriage return line feed. On other operating systems, it just does a \n. So that is the basics of the Hello World application and what each individual component does.